What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Survivor Now podcast. My name is Randy, and today, for the moment, I'm not joined by Abraham, but I have an incredible guest. I mean, he is an expert. You might know him from the podcasting side of things. Let me just say that. But he was also in Survivor Token Chains and voted on by the fans. So he's a fan favorite for Survivor Cambodia. Second chance. I am joined by the ever so wonderful and insightful Stephen Fishbach. Stephen, how are you doing today?
What a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Honestly, like the voted on by the fans was like largely the reason. Like when they called me about Cambodia, I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to go back right now. But the idea of like, getting that to add that to my resume, like voted on by the fans, like that was very, very appealing. So thank you for citing it. I don't know if it's ever been cited before, but I certainly have it on my CV.
That's why I was like, I know you're a fan favorite because they literally voted you like.
That's the thing. Yeah, anyone can call it. Like fan favorite Sierra Dawn Thomas was not voted in by the fans.
Oh man, I was going to do that this morning and I forgot to. Before having you on the show, I was like, I need to look back at everyone who was like eligible to be voted on and see who Steven beat out here. I know some of the names, but I mean, I have to ask them, would you ever play again?
No, definitely not.
Really?
I have hung up my buff. Yeah, first of all, I'm like too old and frail. Like obviously I was never like the most fit for Survivor, but like now it's like I'm just like one like series of joint injuries is like the story of my life. So I don't think I would do it again. Also, I just like, to be honest, when I was a big fan out of the gate and then I kind of lagged. And when they called me, I was like, oh, Survivor's still on. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that. But like, yes, I was that guy. I was a recruit. I was like the height of recruiting, Survivor 18, 19, that era was, all recruiting.
Prime television. Yeah.
But it was, and when I watched the game of Survivor, it appealed to me so much. Like, this is a strategy game that I would love to play. I love strategy games. I love the game Diplomacy. I love board games. I loved card games that were strategic. And it was like, oh, like A, like this would be extremely fun game to play. And B, I think I could win this. I mean, I was wrong about that, but it was extremely fun to play.
I mean,
but it felt like, and I got close, but the game now, I don't think it would be a game that would either be that fun to play or that I could win. Like what appeals to me about, I mean, I could win, but it's like, in the sense that like, if you throw, blindfold yourself and throw a dart.
If the idols, the game of strategy became a game of chance.
Right. Well, it's a game of chance. And so that is less appealing to me. Like the idea of like suffering and playing a completely random game where you can't really execute a coherent strategy from day one until the end. Is less fun. So
not even like an Island of the Idols Part 2, Stephen Fishbach gets a giant trophy. The giant head.
I'm pretty sure on the list of people that they're going to build giant heads on, I'm like maybe 200 of the.
Oh come on! They could do a Rob versus Fishbach. That would be iconic.
Definitely what the Facebook fandom has been looking for. They would really. But listen, I'm so honored to be here. It's so fun. I have gotten to know you a little bit. Through Expedition,
yes,
which we'll talk about later. But when you asked me to be on, of course, I was thrilled to be here and to get to talk to you about it. But like, P.S. when you said like your co-host was Abraham, and then I saw the intro, I was like, oh, Eric Abraham. Like I didn't put two together. Like I didn't realize that you were podcasting with Eric Abraham, which I'm sure obviously viewers of the show who are watching now, they're like, yes, like please do not rehash the very basics of this that we know. But how can I ask for my own edification? Like, how did you guys connect?
So I'm a big talker, big social person, outgoing. I've always wanted to get in the podcasting game. So back season 41, I decided this is what I'm going to do. Started on my phone. It was literally my phone and some cheap headphones, and I did it in my kitchen all by myself, talking to myself. And I just kind of kept pestering the castaway, not pestering, but I kept messaging them, hey, would you come on and interview with me? And got like no responses, except Abraham said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And he came on, and it was just about reaching out, and I was like, hey, would you want to do this full time? Like be my color commentator, someone who actually played the game. And he jumped on, and ever since then we've covered the US, the international seasons. We do exit interviews for Australia and South Africa Survivor. So yeah, it's just continuing to grow the show. And it's people like you, Stephen, coming on and joining us. And obviously the fans as well. I do have to point out the chat. You guys can hop into the the live chat. We like to call it the ancient voices. So jump into the ancient voices and let us know. We'll take some of your questions at the end of the show. So yeah, it's just, I tell everyone, if you want to start a podcast, just do it. Don't be annoying to the castaways, but a lot of them are great people, just normal people. Stephen, like yourself.
I'm not a normal person. I'm superb.
It's a celebrity. Yeah. But yeah, so no, thank you so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to this, and I had to wear my glasses today. Sometimes I wear contacts.
This is like a tribute to my glasses?
It is.
Or like not a tribute, but like a mirroring of my, yeah, thanks. Well, they say that, like, honestly, I've heard that as like a good survivor strategy. I don't remember who told me this, but someone who did really well on the show was saying that one thing they did was just try to subtly mirror the body posture and the mannerisms of other people, because, you know, just subconsciously you respond better to people who, I mean, who have, you know, some of your idiosyncrasies. And so that person, I truly don't remember who it was. I mean, I feel like it's something that Sophie would say or do, you know, she's that meticulous, but like,
that does sound about right.
Yeah. Or that sociopathic is maybe the, you know, the term, but, no, I just like, did I lose you? Am I solo here? Did Randy drop out? All right. Hey, this is my podcast now. Great. So I have taken over the Survivor Now podcast, and I'm going to rename it The Fish Has a Podcast. And that was really all the material I had. Oh, Randy's back. Okay.
I have no idea what happened, whether it, I don't know. I think you stayed on because Jack said you're alone, Stephen. That has never happened. It just blinked, said you lost connection, try again, and then it re-entered. I looked.
Hey, great to see Jack. Jack here as well. That's very fun.
Oh yeah, it's a community that we're building. So yeah. I guess that's our cue, Stephen. I'm sorry you didn't get to finish hearing what you were saying there, but I guess that's our cue to get to the episode that happened last night. Yeah. So really quickly, I do want to know how you're enjoying this season, because I thought I did something different last night. I take notes usually, so I'm focusing on the episode. I've got it in the background. I'm taking notes because we usually go live right after the episode. But last night, I'm like, look, I got the morning to kind of think about things, recap it. Let me just sit back like I used to do and just enjoy watching it. Yeah. And I think personally, it was the episode of the season.
First of all, hold on a second. You're counter programming my podcast? That's so insulting.
We don't even touch your podcast. We're more of a rewatch.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's good. So that, yeah, I liked it. I actually thought last week was, for me, a super fun episode that I enjoyed a little bit more, because it did feel like, you know, but I think that the virtues of this episode and last episode were very similar, which was it's the full tribe. They're voting, you know, just a normal Survivor vote.
As normal as you can get now.
Well, right. As normal as you can get. The first two of the season. Yeah. And granted, it was an immunity challenge where half the people sat out. But, you know, in terms of like the whole group coming together and having and seeing those dynamics play out in this really fun way, that really felt very, like, it was great to watch. And I felt like that was true of last episode too. I'm really liking this season. You know, I think that it's got a great cast. You know, it's not too advantage heavy in a way that becomes sort of confusing and like what's going on now, but you know, there's enough going on where it kind of keeps things a little bit tense. I thought it was very fun last night that the knowledge is power advantage kind of came back more as a threat than as an actual item at play. Like, to me, that's fun when the players know what the possibilities are and they are thinking around them. I don't like it when some like crazy new superpower enters the game. Nobody could have predicted it, and then it upends everything. Like, that to me is not that fun. But when there is a danger of something, the players are aware of it, and then their strategies are, you know, kind of baked around that. Like, that to me is very interesting game.
I think you hit it spot on. The cast this season is what's making it for me. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, if they do a returnee season, I know everyone keeps saying when they're going to bring it up. If they do a returnee season 7 or 8, I just imagine there's so many people in this cast that I'm like, they have to be guaranteed to be coming back. Yeah. We did see Kane go home last night. What did we think about Kane's game overall and what led to his elimination? Because I will say, I watched the podcast last night and Rob said it best. He's like, Kane just never felt like he got his footing in the game, really.
Yeah. I mean, but who knows, right? I mean, like, it does feel like a who knows situation where, for a brief moment in time, he and the Ratu group looked like they were together. And there also seemed to be a point where Kane, was kind of reaching out to some of the Soka misfits, seemed to have a thing with Carson, obviously from Tika. We saw him chatting with, Franny and that seemed like we speculated that was a natural fit with him, being, very nerd forward in his in his thinking. And then, with Franny and Matt maybe being a good connection for him, and certainly with Carson. But yeah, it didn't, I almost felt like it was that first vote where, Kane was it was tight with Brandon. And then because of the way that first vote worked out, where Kane didn't want to vote for Brandon, but then everybody else said they were voting for Brandon.
Yeah.
But then the way it turned out, he was the only one who voted for, Maddie also voted for Brandon, but then she was eliminated. And then, Lauren, banked her vote. Matthew and Jamie, they played their shots in the dark, so they didn't have to vote. So it turned out that Kane, who was the one guy who really didn't want to vote,
he just kind of got stuck on the ballot.
Yeah, suddenly he's the one guy who's actually there. It's like, and it really I think, soured that relationship. And I think, when you're on Survivor, so much is about just feeling the safety of your little crew. And I think that's what Tika has going for them so well. It's that trio feels really tight. They're really bonded together, and they have this comfort of, hey, we've been through it. We've been through this very brutal pre-merge, and we are a tight three. And I think there's almost nothing that can kind of replace that level of closeness. And I really do think that kind of early alienating moment for Kane just, sort of backfooted him, where suddenly I don't have my crew. Who's my group? And then, I do think that kind of probably hurt the Ratus generally, that there was just this sort of, distrust between them, where that wasn't ever really the case for the Tikas and even for the Sokas. They pretty much all voted together. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Ratus had this formative moment that really splintered them.
I think I was shocked last night. The thing that really shocked me, you brought up Carson and Kane's relationship. We saw Carolyn and that Tika trio, if you want to say it like that. They were kind of at disagreements where Carolyn didn't want to target Kane, and she had this whole, what has Kane done? I just don't see him as a threat. She'd rather get out Danny, who was kind of the other option, where Jam Jam was on a mission. He had a hit list, and he's like, literally the last member that he needs to get is Kane. And then Carson, I thought Carson would play more of a factor in this decision-making, whether to go with Danny and Kane. And I thought he was closer to Kane because of that kind of the nerd squad alliance that they had going on there. And he ultimately, him and Carolyn voted with Jam Jam to vote Kane out of the game. Were you as shocked in that decision as I was? Because when I was watching the votes back, it was like, okay, so Tika fully went with Soka here.
Yeah. I mean, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of Carson's thinking, hey, where does Carson feel about? I mean, maybe it would have taken away from the surprise of the episode, because I think, a lot of people going into Survivor Council did feel like Danny was being set up for a blindside. And if Carson had been clear about it, but you can always get someone to be, give the could be him, it could be him, confessional. That's a very classic. I mean, the producers tell you, they're like, hey, tell me why it could be either of these people. Even if you know who you're voting for, just give me the rationale for both of these votes. You're like, okay, you know what they're doing. And that's part of the episode. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of Carson kind of talking through his thinking. And I felt that a little bit, obviously, with a couple of relationships we've seen, the Danny Brandon one, obviously being very formal.
Which lasted one episode.
Yeah. We see these relationships formed, and then we don't see any of the rationale for their dissolution. And, I do feel kind of narratively unsatisfying, where, if it's great to see these kind of bonds, but we also want to see, hey, give me at least a line of the strategic calculus for why that bond no longer matters to you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add on to that. I said the vote was between Kane and Danny.
Yeah.
But Danny, didn't even receive the majority of the votes. It was Heidi. So it somehow got flipped. I'd like to see why it got flipped to Heidi. And then Jamie also received a vote from Franny, which I think we might all just be chalking up as like a throwaway vote. Potentially,
just it could be a throwaway. I mean, I don't think it's impossible that she put a vote on Jamie just to make Jamie feel a little bit scared, to flush an idol, this hypothetical idol she has. Yeah, but there's not a lot of logic to that. I mean, it does seem like the issue with the vote split was that Ratu thought that they were going to have the majority of the votes on Danny, but then the majority of the votes, then all three of the Tikas who were supposed to be Danny votes, then just like flip their votes over to Kane.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But as Rob pointed out, you really want the most solid votes to go on the prime target, right? So Ratu should have put all of the Ratu votes plus whomever, maybe Carolyn, on.
Because they had the extra vote too. Jamie used
right. Do all the Ratu votes and the extra vote on Danny, and then do the three Tikas on Heidi. And again, like there's always like some politics about that. Like Carolyn clearly wanted Danny gone, so maybe Carolyn would have been like, I really want to vote for Danny, and okay, whatever. Versus maybe someone didn't want to vote for Heidi, but for the most part you want to stack the most reliable votes on the person you really want to go home.
Stephen, there was another funny thing that happened last night. I was laughing about it and I'm like, this is just, I don't have much insight on what's going to happen with season 45 and season 46 moving forward. We've brought up the knowledge is power, but if there's one thing I know about Jeff Probst is if something doesn't work, we're going to do it all over again until it creates some good television. And there were 3 production planted fake idols this season, and there were 2 made. The one by Matthew, at Ratu, and then the incredible one that was created by Josh. So 5 total fake idols. None of them were played because Kane left with Jamie's idol last night. I felt very bad because he's saying in his exit confessional, man, I left with an idol in my sock. I'm like, no, you didn't. You left with a fake one. So, I mean, this is such a disappointing outcome for what Survivor and CBS were looking for here with these fake idols, because it was going to be so chaotic with the real idol notes, with the fake idols, and they all looked different. So do we think this is something that they're going to bring back in the next couple of seasons? Let's try it again. Let's throw out 6 fake idols. One of these have to be
exactly 18 fake idols. Something will eventually pay off. I mean, there was a lot of like very fun television around it.
There was.
I mean, certainly the Josh idol was hilarious. And this idol was fun, like they created this bond between Matthew and Jamie. It did go nowhere, but it created a lot of very fun moments with Jamie. I don't necessarily want, and I know I was just saying that I want to see like if there's a relationship established, I want to see why it doesn't stay together. But like for something like a fake idol, like I kind of like that not everything pays off. Like every single gun, was going to lead to the Chekhov's gun rule, like in a short story, but that can become tedious, when you're like, okay, we see this, so like something big is going to happen down the line. It's sort of like that.
It feels scripted in a
well,
sense.
Right, exactly. And the fun thing about an unscripted show is that like something can seem really big and then like like this disappears
exactly
into nothing. So I honestly don't hate it. I mean, I don't love production giving them fake idols. I think that's good, but like the Josh, the ones that were not production created were the best ones. Like the Josh one, hilarious. And then this thing with Jamie, where she didn't even know it was a fake, and no one in the game. And so what's so interesting was like when Matt's medevac, like nobody in the game knows it's a fake idol.
Stephen, would you have known that just going back to Josh's real fast, and I know that was so long ago, would you have known that was a fake idol?
I don't know. I mean, you hope so, right? The thing is, like, you always have to wonder. And there was that scene with that, with Carolyn's like telling everybody at the reward, like, hey guys, like it's a fake. I know it's a fake.
They ignored her.
He showed me the same note, but also like if there's any hint, you have to take it seriously. Even if Carolyn's saying no, like I don't trust Carolyn. Like Carolyn's not playing for me to win. Carolyn's playing for Carolyn to win. So. If there's any kind of like hint, you still have to just consider the possibility. And
learn that lesson, future Survivor players. If you go on, make sure you pay attention to tree mail and don't just read it and throw it away. Because that's my thinking was like I would not remember the beads that came at tree mail that morning. So the other big talking point this episode, and it was a huge one. I didn't know they've done this 4 years in a row. I knew that they've been doing it. And it is the negotiation of a sense for Rice. This is the number I want 4 people to sit out. And this was the first time, Stephen, that I seriously thought we were not going to get 4 people.
Yeah.
Danny had that like inspiring speech. Let's be the season that we just play. And it didn't look like anyone was going to sit out. And I mean, we were there for probably like 4 or 5 minutes seeing if anyone's going to sit out. And I was kind of calling out Heidi. Heidi kept looking down and was like, is anybody going to sit out? And I'm like, why don't you just sit out?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to keep asking people. So a couple questions with this. I'm interested to hear your opinion on the negotiation for Rice. And then also, did you think we were going to get the 4 people? I'm also questioning why they didn't just say, can we make 3 work?
Yeah, right. I mean, there was like literally no negotiation. I mean, that was the comedy of the moment. Was Jeff kept on calling it a negotiation, but in fact he set a price and then waited until that price was either met or not met. And the contestants, at least from what we saw, it's possible someone was like, hey, what about 3? And he immediately negged it. Although I do feel like that would have made air. We're like, okay, like we got to find 4. Like, so, I mean, there was like, I guess, a negotiation between the contestants themselves, to some degree, but like the premise was, Jeff, right, early on in the 40s, it was kind of like Jeff's trying to feel it out. Like, how many are you going to give me? What's fair for, but because all the leverage is with Jeff, right? Like he doesn't he's not getting anything. I guess like
he doesn't care if you keep starving out there.
Right. And he doesn't care if you step down, it's not really a negotiation per se, right? Like there's no, I mean, I guess he like wants good television, but like, because there's no thing he desires. I don't know. I mean, I don't love it. It's 4 people who, 3 of whom sat out pretty quickly. They obviously
one of whom went home. Yeah,
one
of which
but like,
went
but
home.
they obviously did not think they had much of a chance to win the immunity challenge. And for the 5 other people, they're like, great, like fewer people competing. So, apart from Danny saying, oh, let's make this a season where nobody sits out. There didn't seem to be a lot of stakes, like there's no, like, who cares? It's like the viewer doesn't particularly care. Like, okay, someone who was going to lose the challenge immediately, like sat out instead.
That's why I thought Carolyn should have sat out. And I know people are going to be like, well, my opinion on Carolyn is she's been like the first one out of these challenges. She hasn't been the best at challenges this season.
Right.
And I know people are like, well, that doesn't mean she shouldn't try. I agree. So good for Carolyn for getting up there and trying. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, someone like Kane who said, I'm not going to win this challenge. So I know some people are going to be out there saying, oh, Kane ruined his game because he didn't play the immunity challenge. If he knew he wasn't going to win that immunity challenge, sometimes that might be the right move to kind of step back, say, okay, I'll sit out for Rice, build those social connections, build some, whatever the word I'm looking for with your tribe, some relationships make your tribe happy. And maybe in return, they won't vote you out. Scout's honor. Unlucky for him, Danny wasn't a scout.
I don't think, I mean, I would, but no one, I think there's a rationale to do it. I'm not going to win immunity. The rice is going to help me. The food, and I did that, right? I sat out of a challenge to eat, where or it was a thing where I have sat out of a challenge to eat, and I, sacrificed my opportunity to compete in immunity to like get supplies for our shelter, because I felt like that gain for me personally was going to be more valuable than the opportunity to win immunity, which I felt was trivial. And I think there's a very self-interested rationale there, right? Like there's no way I'm going to win immunity, but with some rice and, in me, I'm going to be able to think better. I'm going to be able to strategize better. I'm going to be able to improve my position in the game. I don't really think anybody, it's not going to help you not get voted out, as we certainly saw last night. Nobody's going to be like, oh, he did this amazing blessing for me. He got us rice. Like I will never vote him out now. If anything, it increases your target because, he did this, like this,
that's a jury
thing, right? Like now he's got this like little public thing that happened to him. So now he's more of a threat. So I think if anything, it does not help your game in that way, but I do think it can help your game just from like a purely biological, nutrient oriented standpoint.
Well, I'm so between the two of us, if you guys didn't know in the chat, I have not played Survivor, so I'm going to have to go to Fishbach on this one. The rain was coming down. It was torrential. I was like, wow, that is of recent memory one of the bigger rainstorms that I've seen, because it was really coming down. We see Franny win her second individual immunity challenge. Immunity beast, potentially. I think she seriously might be. I would love to see her go on a run here. What's it like? I do have to ask, just from like a fan's point of view, someone who wants to go out there and suffer. What's it like to be in like a downpour like that? Like, how miserable is that?
It's miserable. I mean, these guys though, like it's like clear, it like rains for 20 minutes, and then it's like clear again. But like truly, like, I mean, at those challenges, you're standing by yourself. There's obviously a lot of it. I mean, the adrenaline does help, with the cold, but you're just like, it's just like so, because there's also a lot of waiting that goes into it.
Yeah.
Right. You're like,
oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Explained to you, you're waiting to get set up, and it's just so miserable. Like you're just like standing with nowhere to go, nowhere to be, like out in the rain. I mean, at least when you're back at camp, you can get in the shelter for what it's worth. You can get under the tarp, you can huddle together. But yeah, it's really, and truly, whenever it rains at a challenge, it takes me back to like my first time being, I remember like very clearly when our second challenge in Tocantins was basket brawl. And it just started absolutely pouring, and it was so cold and so unpleasant. And so
I hate that I'm laughing. I feel bad. You're like, oh, we were out there suffering.
No, it's just like,
oh, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the kind of like, okay, well, like the acuteness of that is like memorable, but in the kind of like, oh, cool, I lived through that way. When it rains for 3 days, that's like actually horrible. Like, but like I was freezing for a challenge on Survivor, like that's kind of cool and fun, and to to have done it feels like tough. But the like I sat through 3 days where I couldn't eat because we couldn't make a fire. Like that just was awful.
Check off not eating and suffering in the cold in your Survivor bucket list. I'm sure you've checked off a lot of boxes there. I do want to loop back around to Franny's game here, Stephen. I think Franny's in a huge position. I messaged last night in the chat. You were talking about how you don't want to get into the edit and everything, but it sure feels like we're heading towards a Tika final 3, which I can agree. Like, it seems like that might be the path we're going down.
Right.
I almost feel like if anyone gets into that final 3 and it's not a Tika member, I don't know what it is about her. I think Franny is playing a great game. I think it would be very poetic. Her boyfriend got sent to the jury. First thing, he's obviously the mayor of Ponderosa. He can petition for her game and why she should be winning. In your opinion, where do we see Franny right now? Because she had that throwaway vote. We can just assume it's a throwaway vote on Jamie. She's been winning immunities. How many more can she compete in before people say, hey, we need to get Franny out? She's a serious, immunity threat. So I'm concerned. There is concern there, but I also think she has what it takes to make it to the end. I just don't see her having a number one ally like someone like Danny and Heidi and Carolyn and Jam Jam, or even Carolyn and Carson.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're right that not having that other person is such a huge problem. And especially, I mean, the Danny Heidi relationship is very good, as is the sort of, Carson, Jam Jam, Carolyn trio. I, a couple weeks ago, podcasted with James Jones, and he was making the point that the thing you want most of all is like a partner who's not kind of in your archetypal, window.
And we maybe saw like the beginning of that. She did mention Carolyn last night as yeah. But someone who's like dissimilar from you, where people aren't going to like see you as a duo in a way that like Franny and Matt, were very clearly a duo. So I mean, Franny's threat level is huge, right? She's got, like you said, I mean, the fact that she's got her boyfriend on the jury, that's not lost on the contestants. No, they know that, yeah.
And the fact that she's winning all these immunity challenges. I mean, the only thing is, like, I do think, as someone who's had this happen, like when you get an idol played on you, I felt acutely, in my perspective. What's your perception? Like, I think it would probably, that's a big negative, right? If you're saved by someone else playing an idol on you, I think it would be harder to go and win. Now, Franny's got a lot of other accomplishments especially with the immunity wins, but I do think it's like a net negative in like the score sheet.
You can't really put that on your resume. Like, you can't at Final Tribal be like, I successfely played an idol to keep me in the game. Well, no, you didn't. Danny did, and
you're like I had the social relationships to get people to. Other people were saving me. It's like you try to position it as like a positive, but yeah, I mean, I think it's like a net negative. So I mean, what's your take? Do you think she's like the next target, or do you think there's another more pressing one?
I think Tika is going to be the next target. If I did throw out someone right now, I just think next episode feels like the appropriate time for everyone to realize Carolyn, Jam Jam, and Carson are just sliding by. We saw it this episode. We kind of saw the seeds planted of like Franny being like telling people, look, they're just going to skate by to the end.
Right.
And that's why it got me a little worried because I have been all team. This is easy. Tika's going to make it to the final 3. It's, it's easy to see. These are 3 big characters who have been dominating the edit per se. In a sense, not really Carson, but definitely Jam Jam and Carolyn. So that's how I was looking at it. But now I'm starting to come around to, I could definitely see, Ratu and Soka be like, next week, why are we tearing each other apart when Tika is doing nothing over here?
I mean, the challenge is that for Ratu and Soka, they've got so much animosity, like after voting. I mean, so they may like abstractly be able to say like, hey, Tika's playing the middle, but because Ratu and Soka have just been targeting each other so consistently, it's hard to overcome that. There's a lot of momentum there. So they may be able to say like, yeah, we need to get rid of these Tika guys, but first, let's get rid of Danny. So I do think that's always a challenge, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. Who do you think will be first? Go ahead.
Oh, well, I think I was about to answer what you were going to ask there. First to go. Were you going to ask first to go between Tika?
Yeah. Which Tika do you think will be targeted first?
So I am the type of person that I make a lot of predictions. I get a lot of stuff wrong because I tend to overanalyze what's actually going on.
Yeah.
I'm getting concerned about Carson.
Yeah.
Okay. This is back-to-back weeks where they've talked about him being sick. The first time I'm like, okay, this is good television. He was up all night throwing up. And then this week, again, he was laying down. People are like, Carson, you okay? I just have no energy. And again, and it might have been because of the whole rice thing. Like it plays into, we need food. We're hungry out here. But I do look at that as, okay, why are they showing us? I'm sure everyone's struggling. Why are they painting Carson to be the one really struggling out here? So that's making me nervous. And I would say out of the 3, Carson. Carolyn still has her idol. I don't think she plays her idol for anyone other than herself. Personally, I've been saying everyone's like Carolyn and Jam Jam are 1 and 2. I actually think Carolyn and Carson are 1 and 2 more than Carolyn and Jam Jam, just because I see Jam Jam a lot of times going to Soka and really trying to work with them and Ratu, and where I see Carolyn more talking with, I mean, once the mergatory happened, Carson ran to Carolyn like she was his mom, and it's like a motherly figure, like back together. So I think the target would be, I think it would be something like the target would be Carolyn, but then they would go after Carson from my perspective is how I look at it.
I agree with you that Carson is probably closer with Carolyn. And Jam Jam and Carolyn have that sort of like bickery, married couple vibe.
Yes.
But it does seem like Carson is kind of the peacemaker there, but even between the two of them, where, we saw last night, Jam Jam really wanted to vote for Kane, and Carolyn really wanted to vote for Danny. And and both for personal reasons, right? Jam Jam said that Kane had voted for him. Carolyn didn't like the whole meat, brigade with Danny and Brandon. And it did seem like Carson was the one who kind of like, cooled it down a little bit and was like, let's all get on the same page together. Carson really is so good at playing that mediator role, at being everybody's like little buddy. But I don't like why the fact of him being, and I hear you, like we're seeing a lot of attention paid on his paid to his weakness, and like why are they doing that if it goes nowhere? But like if you were out there, like why would you vote out the guy who is really like physically debilitated? Like that's the guy you want to keep around.
Maybe it's like the underdogs side of the story. Like maybe that's why the edit's kind of, I'm also someone, I don't like to look that big in the edit, but as someone who analyzes the game and covers it, like I try to. The thing with Carson too, that I'm also nervous about Fishbach, and we're going to get into the Expedition Online stuff in a little bit, because that's how we met here. But the thing I'm concerned about is how I played that game is a lot how I see Carson playing this game. Like, oh, I'm such a good friend. I mean, you said it there. I'm such a, just a happy, positive guy. I'm so happy to be playing. But I got caught. So spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear, I just got eliminated this week at the Final 5. I got caught playing all the sides. I was everybody's buddy. I had my core alliance, the Tika trio. I had a trio alliance.
You did, yeah.
And then, but I was still playing the game with everybody. And I kept telling everyone I had 4 final 2 because we didn't know if it was final 2, final 3. I had 4 promises for final 2. And I kept saying in my confessionals, this is going to catch up to me. And it did. And everyone got together and said, Randy's going to just make it to the end. So we'll get more into that. But that's why I'm concerned about Carson, because I've been there. I've played a game like that. And I'm just like, he is playing all the sides right now.
Right.
And all it takes is a few people to come together and say, Carson told you this. He told me this. It helps them, I think, that Kane is gone, because that's one relationship that he doesn't have to worry about coming back to bite him. But at the same time, that's all it takes in this game. It's ever changing. 2 people get together, point out Carson, and I think he could be a huge social threat.
Yeah, no, and I do think there's an element too. I was saying, like, why would you, if you were out there, vote out someone who's sick and weakened? But I actually do think they do kind of think of that, like, oh, he's weak, let's like put him out of his misery. There's a sense, okay, like this guy who maybe, could be dangerous later on, like he's inhibited now, like let's just like lop it off. And I definitely felt that in Cambodia when I was really sick. Like people were like, let's just get this sick guy out of here.
Let's send him home. Let's put him out of his misery.
Yeah. And I do think there is that sort of like, it's like as always, anything that puts a target on you is not a good thing. So it's like, you're too strong, you're too weak, like whatever it is, like if there's a reason for people to be talking about you, like that's the reason that they can send you home.
It'll be.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I was going to say.
I was going to say that the danger of playing that role of like being everybody's buddy, there's like the danger that it catches up to you, right? Which you experienced, where you were voted out like right before the beginning, and like you're like right before the end, and like you were in every alliance, and you were everybody's number 2, and then suddenly everyone, like people get together and like, wait a second, this guy's in every alliance.
He promised you number 2. He promised me number 2. Yeah.
But the other danger is that you get to the end and everyone's like, that's the little buddy, like that's the guy who. He wasn't the leader; he was the friend, and which I felt like happened to me in Survivor Tocantins. So we're all watching this through the the lens of our own trauma, but I felt like that's also a possibility for Carson, right? Where he gets to the end and everyone's like, okay, like lovable Carson, like he didn't mastermind anything, and it's so hard in that moment to convince people that you did. If
you didn't
Carson.
piss anyone off on the jury too. Like if you're a little petty for someone in the remaining 3, your vote could by default go to Carson. Well, Carson didn't do this to me, so I'm going to vote Carson. We've seen it before. Yeah. We've seen it several times for the person who potentially should have won the game, didn't, because we might have saw it last season. I'm not trying to throw more shade at season 43. Jeff tries to do enough of that. But so it happens before where the person you think should win and played the best game, they don't, because this person was just a more likable person for the jury.
Yeah, totally.
And one thing that the last thing I want to cover here before we take our quick commercial break or quick ad break here, something that isn't being talked about a lot, and that is Heidi found an immunity idol last night. And I feel like that it was just a great episode of not a lot of twists. They had a day off of tribal council, so it seems like the tribe would. Yes, we could talk about that for a minute here. They had a day off. Like if you guys didn't know that, they went to tribal council back to back for the last few votes. They finally had a night off, and we finally got to see some just normal antics around camp. They're playing this game. Carolyn, I thought, was saying, the other word for butt on national television, nonstop. I guess that's how she pronounces S, is what I've been told. She was trying to say S.
Yeah, she was trying to say S.
I thought, I was so confused. I'm like,
what? You really thought she was trying to say ass?
I thought, no, yes, you can. You're fine. I thought she was saying ass. Yeah. And I thought she kept saying it. So like everyone's laughing about this. I'm like, I don't get the joke. I don't get aren't you just supposed to say letter? So that makes much more sense. But Stephen, like how much is this needed to give castaways a night off from tribal council? I know they're trying to cram everything in this 26-day game, but how necessary is this?
It's so important for so many reasons. Like you get these like lovely character moments and like this bond. Well, like the bonding, as great as it is for TV, that's the heart of Survivor. That's what makes Survivor a hard game to play, is like you're creating these deep bonds, surviving in the woods together. And then you have to break those bonds, or you use those bonds. And that to me was always, we were talking about at the start of the episode about, or the show, why, I wouldn't want to play again. It's like, that was the game of Survivor. It's like, how do you, use these social connections to create a strategic game plan? But if you never have a moment to breathe and you never have a moment to bond, this is since the merge, right? They have not had any downtime. And when you think about the timing too, a day with an immunity challenge, you do not have a lot of time to talk, because you get up, maybe you make a little bit of rice for breakfast, and then you go to the challenge, you're waiting around, you play the challenge, you're waiting around, everyone's doing interviews. There's just not a lot of time. So there's not a lot of time to talk and to really get to know people. And there's also not a lot of time to strategize. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? This is why sometimes the strategy seems so, I think one of the reasons why I think recently the strategy has seemed kind of frenetic or hard to track, or maybe very cut and dry even. I mean, I know those are sort of opposite problems, but nobody has time to create a new plan. Like, they're coming home from tribal council, they got an hour, to run around on the beach. Whose name? Okay, that's the name. Great. Like, we're good.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt had this metaphor a couple of, I think maybe it was in his boot episode, or maybe it was the previous one, where he talked about Survivor at the merge, or maybe it was at Mergatory, being, you're going on a ski slope and you're, slaloming between the flags, and then suddenly a confetti cannon goes off that announces a name, and you're like, wait, you're trying to pick up the pieces to figure out what a name. And I thought that was so perfect for the chaos of everyone on the beach, and so much coming at you at once. But if that's all the time, how does anyone ever have a strategy?
It perfectly said. And I mean, Brandon said it in last episode. We didn't even see it, but they had the plan to split the votes. But he said they just had no time to all come together and say who's voting who. So that led to them just all piling on Franny. So it's a shame that they don't have, an afternoon to fully talk and strategize. And it's such a fast-paced game now. But I will say, if you're watching, get used to it. I don't think you gotta move it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it took me a while, but you kind of just have to take a breather and be like, this is Survivor now. So real quick, Stephen, I did want to ask about Heidi finding this idol that kind of just gets swept under the radar by what happened the rest of the episode, because it just happened so quickly. We saw everybody looking for it. Editing was doing a great job jumping around. I truly didn't know who was going to find it. I'm like, someone's just going to come up with this. And Heidi was probably at the bottom of the list of someone who I thought was going to come out with this idol. Is Heidi someone that is playing a really good game right now that maybe is flying under the radar? She had that, even though it didn't really make a difference. She had the control of vote advantage that she found. She now has an idol. She's been working a pretty social game from what we've been able to see. So how do we see Heidi's game moving forward now with this idol?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think Heidi's got a really underappreciated game or underappreciated game. Last week she was one of the key ones to really push the Brandon vote. She was really the one who it looked like she was the one who kind of really brought the Tikas in on that vote. We've seen her have a lot of little moments with people. I think Heidi's playing a very strong game where, I mean, truly, if Heidi was the winner of the season, I would not be shocked. If Heidi was the person who snuck in to the end with
Danny. So yeah, well, I guess Stephen lost connection now. It's a live show, so he'll be right back. Go ahead and let us know in the comments down below who you want to be the player of the game. We're going to take a quick commercial break here in a minute, and then once we get Fishbach's thoughts here, are you back?
I'm back. I think I got booted out very suddenly. Oh my gosh!
I said it's Fishbach's turn. It was just your turn to take the journey. That's so right. Hopefully you didn't get.
I said something. I was talking about Heidi, and maybe it was just maybe there's a spoiler out there. I just gotta get this out of here.
She's sitting at the end with Danny. I wouldn't be shocked if the casual viewer, they're like, Danny played the best game. He played his idol. He's gonna win. But then Heidi comes away with the win because she played a more complete game.
Yeah, I mean, she's had a social game. She's been a big, she was the one. I mean, last week, it wasn't like a perfect finesse where she told all of the Tikas about Danny's idol, and that did create room to, for there to be a potential flip of the vote. But that didn't happen. So good for her. She read it correctly.
No harm, no foul. So yeah, definitely don't be shocked if she makes it to the end and steals this. I think that's what makes the season amazing. There's huge players that we all can see dominating to the end and winning this game, but then there's not a lot of GOATs this season, if you want to put it like that. There's a lot of players who could make it to the end and theoretically have a huge chance to win. So, well, Stephen, hang out with us here for a minute. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Everyone who is watching, let us know who you think the player of the game is. And when we get back, we will give our player of the episode. Sorry, not player of the game. We'll give our player of the episode for you guys to vote on Instagram. We will be right back.
What's up, everybody? Coach Benway, the Dragon Slayer.
Hey, guys. This is Stephen Fishbach.
I mean, I'm definitely going to win.
I'm ready to bring it.
This is amazing.
Team coach here, out to a quick lead.
Oh my God, wait.
Oh, I knew it was going to be this.
It is not going to take much to derail a party.
Are there swaps in this game? They kind of suggested that there were twists.
Oh my gosh, I just...
Each party is going to be eliminating one player.
54, but I'm full of piss and vinegar.
I'm not voting for you. I don't want you gone.
In 5 seasons of Expedition Online, this is the first time we've ever seen a crossroads like this.
I'm about to be screwed.
And that was the most traumatic thing I've been through. And I went to a funeral today.
Oh my God, Lori just came back.
He's gonna be so mad, Rose.
I think he's scared of it. Buddy, you gotta go.
Bring them into your circle of trust.
This is where great players shine. It's basically the Dollop Howe strategy here.
Well,
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I was just going to say, yes, that is how, if you guys have not checked that out, it is called Expedition Online. I will put a link in the description after this goes off air for you guys to check out. It is an online reality game. You guys might know them as orgs. And it's basically Survivor, just played online and not in the rain and cold. And I was a castaway this season. Steven took me with with his second pick because it was Steven versus Coach. I guess Fishbach versus Coach. I don't know why I keep calling you Steven. I should have.
I go by Steven. Yeah. I mean, Steven is my name.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really have a strong preference. You know?
I was like, I keep switching back and forth.
That's how most people refer to me. You know,
it was campaigned as Fishbach versus Coach, and you guys got to choose players. You got to draft us onto your tribes, and I was drafted second. And spoiler alert, because we just got to the final 5. I was just eliminated this last Monday, so they're heading into the final 4. It's the home stretch now, and everyone remaining has a great shot to win. And I'm very excited to cast my vote on the jury. So yeah, Fishbach, this is our first chance to kind of talk about like the game. We can spend a few minutes here chatting about it.
Great. Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, I honestly got like chills watching the trailer that they just did. I mean, it's such a cool thing. And like the intensity of these online games, it's like the strategic intensity is truly like, it has to be more complex than Survivor, because Survivor is somewhat, I mean, obviously just like circumstances reduce, you know, in the amount of time you have reduces.
You're starving.
Strategic options. You're starving. You don't have that much time. You know, it reduces your options, but like when you've got like a lot more time and you're not starving, you know, suddenly like everything becomes like, that's part of the reason I would never play one of these, is that I just couldn't handle it. Was just like too intense.
Oh, Fishbach, you would be amazing.
No, yeah,
but you would be amazing.
I mean, it sounded like you truly, I mean, the last thing from the trailer was like me saying it's the Jalapeno 3 strategy. Like you had that, it was like you, Robbie and Simona, like were this trio, and that, you know, you started together, you guys quickly got down in numbers, and then you guys have done so well, obviously, until they turned on you.
Well, the crazy thing is, so I had, my family knew about it. They knew what was going on, and they kept telling me, you have to turn on Robbie and Simona, because for those of you who haven't seen it, there was this insane tribal council. It was at I want to say the 3rd tribal council. Yes, it was the 3rd tribal council, where it was a split vote between me and this other player, Holden, and it was Robbie and Simona. They split, and then on the revote, they split again because Robbie switched over and Simona's because they mixed up who they were going to do, and then they got 2 minutes to decide who was going home, or they'd have to compete in a challenge, and the loser between them goes home. And it was 2 minutes of Holden and I awkwardly just sitting there while they say, do you want to go with option A or do you want to go with option B? So it was so obvious that they were a duo. And my family and friends, they were like, why would you go with that? Why would you not turn on them to get them out immediately? I just saw for my game, you know, I felt like if I stayed with them, they would take me far into the game. I knew I would have to cut ties.
Right.
And that was the plan. The plan was to cut ties with Robbie at the Final Four, beat him at hopefully he doesn't win the individual immunity challenge, and then I could send him out on fire making. That was the plan. And Robbie just pulled the trigger before I did, is what it came down to.
Well, what was so fun for me was, I got to, as the coach, not as coach, but as the coach or a coach, I got to, correspond with you guys. And I was always like wondering how much, because people would like email me asking for strategic ideas or like kind of like just like bouncing ideas off of me. And I always wondered, like, are they giving me the full picture? Because like everyone was like, I'm BFFs with Randy. I think Robbie said you were his number one. I think Simona said that at one point. So like, if they're, but like, were they like double crossing me? Were they like really working together to take, because they didn't want like any information flow to
leaking back to me. I mean, Stephen, I took your advice when I sent you an email that night, and I was like, this is what happened. I don't know what I'm going to do now. It's a tribe of 3. And if we go back, and you were the one who said, just forgive them, kind of calm down. It was a mess. And I took that advice, and it took me to the Final 5.
Or I was totally wrong. I'm so sorry. Like, you got voted out. They eventually betrayed you. Your family, you should have listened to your family instead of like some internet stranger. And Jack, who is in the chat, I think still was the last coach standing, right? So it's not there's 3 people from my draft who are Robbie and Simona, who you were talking about, and David. And it was very funny. Like my first 3 picks, my first 2 guy picks were Robbie and Randy. My first girl pick was Simona, and my last pick was David, and he's killing it. That's a totally other thing happening. I mean, the reason that he was my last pick was because he like very explicitly stated he wanted coach to draft him. So I was like, I don't want someone on my team who like doesn't want to be with me. But Jack has been killing it. He's playing. I mean, they're not called idols, right? But like
compasses. So he's found 6 compasses.
He's got this like superhuman ability to find these compasses. And I remember like everyone would be emailing me like, we got to get rid of Jack, but like he's like getting compasses like right and left. And and right about now, because obviously this is airing, after it happened. But everyone was emailing me from my group, like, maybe I should stick with Jack. Like, maybe this is an opportunity to,
I highly considered it,
to flip the game on its head and go with Jack. So like TBD, what happens? I don't know how this ends. So I'm really excited to see what happens.
I worked with Jack for 1 vote. It was a double idol play. I got swapped to a tribe where I was in the minority. I was the only like Fishbach member that hadn't found a new alliance, and I worked with Jack, and it was a double compass play. So that was the one time. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. They are taking applications for future seasons. So go ahead and I'll put the link in the bio as well. If you guys want to play, I definitely recommend it. They get captains from actual Survivor that you can interact with, and they've talked about doing a returnee season one day. So I will not rule out. They do want to do eventually All-Stars and stuff. So I will not rule out maybe returning if I get that call. So yeah,
have fun. Yeah,
it was a ton of fun. The last thing I wanted to ask about that, Stephen, are you going to be at the live reunion show? Do you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. Of course,
you're going to be there.
I got to find out what happens. My gosh, I'm like so excited.
Oh, good to hear. And I hope Coach is there as well. So, all right. So I think we covered most of last night's episode, but it is time that we give our picks for player of the episode. And if you guys are new to the show, you guys will get to vote on the options that we present to you guys. You can go to our Instagram at Survivor Now Podcast. It will be in the story later today where you guys can vote. The last 2 weeks, Lauren was player of the week when she, a couple weeks ago when she decided not to play her extra vote. That's when she looked at Jeff and was like, does she get my extra vote as well? She decided not to play it and keep it. And then Danny won last week after he farted. And I think that's mostly the reason.
What it was for, I think was a good choice for 2 weeks ago. I kind of regret, I said Jam 2 weeks ago, but I was really on the fence between. I think Lauren was the right call for 2 weeks ago because she seemed to be the one who was really pushing them to vote out Matt.
And she could have just wasted her extra vote.
Yeah.
But she knew she did the numbers. She's like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to use it. So I'll start with you, Stephen, because you were our guest this week. I put some thought into this. I have a couple names, so I might just go with whatever name you don't say. Give the people an option here. So who would you say is player of the week?
Well, for me, it was Jam Jam. I mean, like, it was a good episode for Heidi for sure. But for me, it was Jam Jam because, you know, you can really see Jam Jam crafting this story, you know, that he's going to tell at the end. And so much of who wins in Contemporary Survivor is who's got, it's not like a resume. I think a resume is a little bit reductive, but like who can tell their story best, right? Of like what their Survivor journey was. And we certainly saw that with Gabler last season, someone who, you know, you wouldn't necessarily have felt going into that final tribal, like what did he do? What did he deserve to win? You know, definitely saw that with Marianne, right? She shows up and has this, like, you know, talks about the secret idol. Like, it's like less about what you do than about how you present the things you do. And so much for Jam Jam is everyone who wrote my name down, I got him off 1, 2, 3, 4. And so he was really pushing to take out yet another person that was on his hit list, and he did. And I think, like, for him, both to get out someone who had targeted him and to be so visibly crafting that final narrative, I think was a great episode for him.
So I mean, Jam Jam is a great one. Chris in the chat here says, I believe that the player of the episode was Carson.
That's a good one. I was thinking Carson too, you know, really, like, if there's two sides and Tika's in the middle, Carson's in the middle of the middle. Like, he is the hinge around which the game is turning.
I'll give you a few other so we'll give you 4 options this week. We got Jam Jam, we got Carson. I'll throw out Heidi, obviously finding an individual immunity. Well, I don't know why I said individual. Finding an immunity idol is huge. So great play for Heidi. I do think she continues to play a great social game as well. Doesn't have a lot of eyes on her. And I will also throw out Franny winning her 2nd individual immunity challenge. And, you know, throwing out that Jamie vote could be smart for her. She stays face with some people on the tribe. She doesn't really pick a side. So that was a great strategic move as well. So those are your options. I know we're running a little low on time here, Stephen, but do we have some time for a couple questions?
Yeah,
here?
Of course. Yes.
Awesome. So you guys reached out to me on Instagram and Facebook, and we got a few that I picked out here. So Chris wants to know, how often do you recap the US episode on a different podcast other than Rob has a podcast?
Very rarely. I mean, I'll do it occasionally, but not very frequently. But so I truly honored to be here today.
I was going to say, I'm honored. Thank you for doing this. I thought so. When you said you were going to come on, I was surprised, not because of, like, I didn't think you'd be like, no, no, I've got my own stuff, but I never see you do another show other than Rob has a podcast. So I'm like, I didn't know if you would be down to pull the double duty this week.
Yeah, no, I truly was honored. Like, so, but honored that you asked and honored to be here. You know, I do also, I don't know if you know who Reality Steve is, but I do
heard of him. Yes.
An end of the season podcast with him.
Wow.
But other than that, that's it. Yeah, no, this is really fun.
Fully honored. We have a question from our good friend Ian. You knew you were going to get a Tocantins question.
Oh, good. No, I'm delighted. I love to talk about Tocantins.
Who from Tocantins deserves a second chance? And I will add on to that to make it a little harder for you. Who do we think could actually do well in today's era, the new era of Survivor, which is just a game of chance?
Yeah. I saw a picture of him. I saw a picture of him. What a weird thing to say. Like, he was like hanging out with a bunch of the New York survivors. Like, I would love to see Spencer Doom play again. Like, I think he would be a great person to play again. Like, he was so young when he played the first time. You know, he wasn't out. And I think now it would just be a totally different game from him. And he was always a very smart, strategic player. He was just really young, you know. And I think because he wasn't out, like, maybe there always was, maybe his guard was up a little bit, like, and, you know, certainly with some of, like, the bro-ishness on that first Jalapao tribe. And I think that, you know, to play now in this new era would be really great. I mean, obviously everybody wants to see Taj play again. And there was a moment, I think, actually, when she was really considering it. Yeah, no, Taj would be amazing. Like, I doubt she would do it again. I mean, she's, you know, but there was a moment, like, shortly after Tocantins, I don't remember what era this was, where she was, like, really in the mix. And then I think she, like, injured her knee or something, and then had to decide about. But it did seem like actually it was very likely that she was going to go back at one point, which is too bad. I mean, you know, seeing like a Taj Eddie in, like, fans or in Blood versus Water would be so cool. Aaron Lobdell obviously would be so fun to see again. You know, some of these people too, it's like you kind of wish it had happened like sooner after Token Sheens. Again, like we're all so old and frail now. Brendan Sinnott would have been great. I mean, Brendan Sinnott, like the fact that they didn't bring Brendan back is kind of shocking because he was such a huge character on our season and such a driving force. And, also like what made Brendan great was he just had these like obviously huge flaws, like, and like those are the best characters, the ones that are like big players, big personalities with like immensely flawed games. Like those are the ones kind of you want to see if they can improve, see if their flaws catch up with them again.
Do you think realistically that we will ever see someone from Token Chains again?
Taj is the only one you can really see them like calling, right? Like who else from
they're gonna try to call you.
No, I told them. I mean, there was a moment like right after Cambodia, they were like, they were kind of like, hey, like, what's your interest? And I was like, no. So I don't think I'm in the mix. And also, like, to your point, like, there's so many great players who have played. This cast, you're like, how many great players are there? And I remember season 41, you're like, you could see them bringing back half this cast, and that's not even, 43 for sure. You could, season 42 was like a wealth of people. And that's just the 40s, you're not talking about like Devins, Christian, these are just guys who would be competing for like the nerd spot, let alone like all the other, great players who there have been. So I think I would be way down the list, even and I wouldn't say yes if they actually.
You don't think Coach would come back?
Oh, Coach would come back. I mean, yeah.
I was gonna say, if they ask. And then we got one more question here for you before we get on to our closing statements here. We talked about this a little earlier, so I don't think we have to spend too much time on this. But Leopold Films asked, do you think that giving up immunity for Rice is getting a bit old, or do you think in this season or in the sense of Survivor, the grand scheme, is it all right once a season to give away some Rice?
I just wish I liked it more when it was so fun when Jeff would like bring out a plate of cookies. Like to me that was like, like Jeff said that like according Mike White said, like, is it fun? And that's the metric for all things Survivor now. Like, is it fun? Like, is it fun to watch like 9 people in a line kind of like mutter to each other? Hey, why don't you sit down? No, that's not that fun. It was fun when Jeff Probst had a plate of cookies or a burger, like or like and it got more and more. Like that was fun.
Pizza.
Yeah, that was so fun. This is not that fun. What do you think about that, Randy?
I'm forever wishing I want reward challenges back. I know we get them every so often, but obviously with the 26-day game, they kind of threw those to the wayside. I'm going to beat the broken record here, whatever the phrase is, of bring back the auction. I would love to see the auction. I don't know why we don't have eating challenges anymore. I think those were always super interesting to watch. And in general, I mean, like, when you do have a reward, we just do the sanctuary. I loved it when they took him in a helicopter and took him to see this magical location, or they donated toys and stuff to a local Fijian neighborhood. And I thought that was huge. Bring back a car, because I don't think the car curse ever got broken. And that was such a great narrative. So there's a lot that I want back, but it's got to the point. You're just going to really beat yourself up if you keep hoping for the past. So you got to kind of take a deep breath, and just accept the game for what it is nowadays and enjoy that we still have Survivor. And
that's great advice for me too, Randy, because I get I get annoyed sometimes. I'm like, because I invest a lot of time in Survivor. Like I talk about this show every week, and it's like, I mean, as do you, but it feels like, to see it take a turn that I don't love is frustrating. Because also, like, I really believed that the Survivor that I played, not the game I played, but like the Survivor, not my personal game, but like the game itself was the best game that existed. Like, and I thought, you can't like exist in that pristine state forever, and there had to be innovation.
You got to change some things,
But I do feel like it's taken a turn where I don't think that's the case. I think like there's board games that are better than that.
I mean,
or it's like Expedition, something like that, like where there's
much more classic Survivor.
Yeah, just like there's social games of social deduction that are more interesting now and that's kind of disappointing.
I'm just happy that I got to do the auction. Expedition Online had an auction that was hosted by Ethan Zahn.
Oh, that's
and
fun.
That's how I won these 2 signed pictures of Ethan up here.
Oh, cool. That's so great.
Very, very honored to add that to my collection. So let me pull up really fast the closing stuff we have here for you guys. So it is going to be an incredible week of content on the Survivor Now podcast as we continue to grow the community and grow the brand that we're trying to build in this Survivor community. So tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, Eastern will be live with the Queen. You might have heard of her before, Fishbach. I don't know if you know who she is. The Queen, Sandra Diaz-Twine, is coming on to join David and Tegwith to recap Survivor 44, to recap Survivor 44, give her thoughts on the new era, who she's enjoying this season. I ran into her at Fair Play's live event a few weeks ago, and she is just a wonderful person. I mean, absolutely wonderful. She made sure she stopped at every table, and she was actually the one who walked up to the fans and said, hey, do you guys want to take pictures? Like, we can start doing that. I'll sign whatever you want to sign. She is just all about the people and all about the community. Such a wonderful person. So we're excited to have Sandra on. If you do enjoy Survivor Social, you can pick up the new Survivor Social shirt that is available. You can go to our link in our Instagram bio to pick that up. It comes in blue, pink, and there's also, I think, black and white. So if you want to support the show and support David and Tegwith, the work they're doing over there. Fishbach, would you say you're an analytics guy?
I think so. I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know what all the weight of that
means. The EDGIC, the winners at it. You don't like to talk about it, but do you?
Well, I know I do like to talk about it, but I've been so dramatically wrong in the last 4 seasons that I vowed not to talk about it anymore, because I just and obviously they've taken like a total shift in the way they edit the show, where, for someone like Erica to win, Gabler, you do see some of it consistent edit, and apparently if you go back, you can even see why the Eric edit. But that seems to me like forcing a narrative onto something that was,
that's not really there.
And Marianne had a very untraditional attitude. She was a big character that season, but like not at all the character you would think would be the winner. Or at least certainly I didn't. So I have just vowed to not talk about edit for a few seasons because I was so wrong.
I feel that I need to take your advice on this too, because I always make my predictions. My winner predictions go out very early on in the game. So my winner prediction this year was Josh. And I even went a step further and said that I think after this season, Josh would become one of the greatest players we've seen in a long time.
Well, based on just his pregame stuff?
Just his pregame. I was just getting big player. I thought Josh was going to dominate this season, and I was way wrong. Well, episode 9 of Survivor 44 Stock Watch will be out later this week. We actually brought on Jack from Expedition Online. He hosts the show with Will, where they look at the winning percentage of every player left in the game, as well as EDGIC, and they talk through everybody and whether their stock is rising in the game or their stock is falling. They know what they're talking about. They were saying this week that Heidi's stock is through the roof, and I kind of looked at it and I'm like, I don't agree with that. I mean, she's all right. And hey, she found an idol this week and continues to push on. So they really look into the edit. And then lastly, we don't have a date for it yet, but we are in talks for next week. We will be joined by Chrissy Zaremba from Survivor Australia, Blood versus Water, to debrief on the season, heroes versus villains that just took place. We'll look back on the season as a whole. Do you watch Survivor Australia?
I really want to. People have been so in love with this season. I really want to. I watched the early seasons, and it was like just a lot of time. I just didn't have because it's so many episodes and they're all really long.
An hour and a half episodes. And
so I've got a little kid. I just don't know when I'm gonna, when I have the time. So,
oh man,
I really want to though.
Hopefully you find the time. I would just say start with Heroes and Villains, because that season, all time season.
That's so good. I thought the new Brains Brawn was the one to start with, because then that kind of feeds into okay.
A lot of people say Brains and Brawns as well. So, I think that pretty much covers everything. If you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, go check out our social medias. You can see them on the screen here. Fishbach, what are you up to? Because I watched the show last night and I want to make sure we do talk about this. You're doing something I know I can't remember completely, but something in DC, and it's something about like with an author or something.
Yeah. So the author Johannes Lichtman, who is a novelist, he's got a new book out called Calling Ukraine, and it's a great book. It's really funny. It's about an American. I mean, you hear Ukraine, you're like, ha ha ha, funny, hilarious. No, but it's about the period before the Russian invasion, and it was written before the Russian invasion. But it has a lot of sort of the kind of like bleak Ukrainian humor that kind of animates it. But it's about an American guy who gets a job teaching call center workers in Ukraine how to speak better conversational English. Wow. And so it's like both like a very funny story of this guy going to a country and a culture he knows nothing about, and then also has so much of the history of Ukraine, and some of the culture and some of their sensibilities kind of captured in the work. And then it becomes a very interesting novel about how you make moral choices kind of in the sort of difficult world we live in. Like, how do we, stand up for what's right when we see injustice happening in the world? Wow. So it's very cool. And so I'm going to be talking to him on Saturday in Washington, D.C. If any of you are there at Politics and Prose, please do not come and ask me Survivor questions. But you don't have to have read the book to come. He's, I think they'll be selling the book there. He'll be signing books. It's a super fun book. If this at all interests you, I would strongly recommend it. It's Politics and Prose in Northwest D.C.
Wow.
Yeah.
And congrats, man. That is amazing. And I really hope people do not go out and ask you Survivor questions. I didn't even think about how much probably you answer them wherever you are in public now.
Yeah, I think, like a bookstore reading, I think you'd really have to be a jerk to be like, so other person who's not being interviewed today, what do you tell me about your history.
Tell me about token change.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I'll have to, yeah. So I can't imagine that anybody would, but it's if it happens, whatever. And I'll be like,
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a nice way of handling it, Randy.
Well, man, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, I hope you had fun here today. We're taking notes on. We love what you guys do at Rob Has a Podcast. Obviously, if you guys didn't know, I'm sure everyone does. You can catch Stephen pretty much every Wednesday on Rob Has a Podcast, and they do amazing stuff over there. So go check them out. And you have an open invitation, Stephen. If you ever want to come back on the show and talk or do double duty on a week, we'd love to have you back.
Well, thank you. And Randy, truly, I felt immediately connected to you when I saw your application video for Expedition. So it's I loved this guy, even in a brief clip. And so, I saw the game you played, which was fantastic. I'm sorry that it ended when it did.
So close.
Yeah, truly so close. But I I was delighted, and I'm glad to get to know you, and glad to, really honored to be asked to be a guest on this podcast.
Well, thank you again, man. And thank you to all of you. As always, we'll catch you next week to cover more of Survivor 44. Have a good day, guys.
Bye-bye.